They came for the sunshine. But now they're leaving in droves. What's pushing Americans out of paradise? Florida has always been America's dream escape. From retirees chasing warmth to remote workers escaping city taxes, the Sunshine State promised beaches, freedom, and affordability. Palm trees, no state income tax, year-round sunshine. But something's changed. Thousands are packing up and leaving, and not just a few seasonal snowbirds. Families, young professionals, even lifelong residents are heading out. Why? Today we're uncovering the real reasons Americans are fleeing Florida and what it could mean for the rest of the country. From economic pressure to political heat, from environmental danger to broken promises, this story runs deeper than you think. Is this just Florida's problem, or is it a preview of America's future? More people are leaving Florida now than ever before in recent memory. A few years ago, it felt like everyone was moving to Florida. In the wake of the pandemic, the state became a magnet. Over 1,000 new residents arrived daily in 2021. Housing markets exploded. Remote work made relocating easier than ever. For a moment, it looked like Florida was winning the migration race. But fast forward to 2024, and the numbers tell a very different story. Florida's population growth has stalled, and in some counties, it's actually shrinking. According to 2023 to 2024 USPS data, a growing number of households are redirecting their mail out of Florida. U-Haul's latest report? For the first time in over a decade, more one-way trucks are leaving Florida than arriving. And it's not just retirees heading back north. Jenna moved to Tampa from New York in 2019. The weather, the taxes, the lifestyle, it all seemed perfect. But after just 5 years, she was done.
"It wasn't what I expected," she said. "It felt like everything I moved to escape caught up with me, just with worse weather."
She's not alone. Palm Beach County has seen an increase in outbound moves. Miami-Dade, a growing vacancy rate in mid-tier apartments. Even smaller inland towns, once booming, are reporting school closures and a dip in young families. And this isn't a one-off fluke, it's a pattern. So what's driving this quiet exodus? The answer starts where it hits hardest: your wallet. Florida might have sunshine, but that doesn't mean it's affordable anymore. On paper, Florida still seems like a financial haven. No state income tax, favorable business laws. But dig deeper, and you'll find a growing affordability crisis that's making many residents second-guess their decision to stay. Let's start with housing. Between 2020 and 2023, median home prices in many Florida cities shot up by over 50%. In Miami, the average home now costs more than $600,000. In Orlando, nearly $400,000. Even smaller towns have seen explosive price jumps. And it's not just home prices, it's what comes with them: insurance. After a brutal few hurricane seasons, Florida's property insurance market is in chaos. Multiple insurance companies have pulled out of the state altogether. For those who remain, premiums have doubled or even tripled in just 2 years. Some homeowners now pay over $10,000 annually just for insurance. Then there's rent. In cities like Tampa, rents have jumped by over 30% since 2020. Miami is now one of the most expensive rental markets in the country, beating out Chicago and almost matching parts of Los Angeles. So what happened to the idea that Florida was cheaper? It's gone. Or at least, it's gone for the middle class. Income to cost of living ratios in Florida have collapsed. The average Floridian earns just under $60,000 a year. But with rising rent, food costs, energy bills, and insurance, that money doesn't go far. In fact, a 2024 Wallet Hub report ranked Florida among the least affordable states for middle-income families. And the illusion of savings is wearing off.
"We moved here thinking we'd be ahead financially," says Mike, a father of 3 from Jacksonville. "But now, we're barely keeping up. It's not just expensive, it's unstable."
Florida may look like financial freedom, but for many, it feels more like a trap, one that's getting harder to escape from. And while the money pressure is real, it's not the only pressure building in the Sunshine State. The heat isn't just from the sun, it's from the politics. Florida has always been a politically charged state, swinging between red and blue, north and south, coast and inland. But in the last few years, things have escalated. And for many residents, it's no longer just a political difference. It's a cultural battleground. In 2022 and 2023, a string of high-profile laws pushed Florida into the national spotlight. From restrictions on classroom discussions to book bans in public schools to the curtailing of DEI programs in colleges, Florida made headlines. Governor Ron DeSantis became a household name, and national media started calling the state ground zero for the culture war. For some, these moves were long overdue. They saw them as a way to push back against what they viewed as creeping liberalism.
Florida is leading the way, said one local supporter in Fort Myers. We're taking our schools and our culture back.
But for others, it felt like the walls were closing in. A 2024 Pew study found that over 40% of recent outbound movers from Florida cited political climate or social freedoms as a factor in their decision to leave. Many LGBTQ+ families, educators, and professionals, especially in places like Orlando and Miami, have packed up and moved to more socially tolerant states. Even some conservatives are leaving.
It just got too extreme, said one former Tampa resident who had voted Republican for 2 decades. I wanted low taxes, not national headlines every week.
And the tension isn't just in policy, it's in everyday life. Neighborhoods have become battlegrounds over mask mandates, school board elections, and library policies. Local Facebook groups turn into war zones over the smallest controversies. In short, the culture war isn't just on TV, it's on your block. And for many, the stress of navigating daily life in such a polarized environment is too much. So they're choosing peace and packing up. But if you think that's intense, the next factor is even harder to escape. And then there's the rising water. And no, that's not metaphorical. You can't talk about Florida's future without talking about the climate. The Sunshine State is on the front lines of environmental change. And now, more residents are starting to feel it, not in theory, but in their daily lives. Let's start with sea level rise. In 2025, a study from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration projected that Miami could experience up to 12 inches of sea level rise by 2040. That's not 100 years from now. That's within the lifetime of current homeowners. For many neighborhoods in South Florida, the water is already here. King tides regularly flood the streets of Miami Beach. Salt water is seeping into the drinking water aquifers. Home foundations are cracking. Septic tanks are failing. And it's not just coastal cities. Hurricanes are hitting harder and more often. In 2022 alone, Florida was slammed with multiple major storms, each causing billions in damage. By 2024, major insurance companies had exited the state entirely, leaving homeowners scrambling for coverage or going uninsured altogether. Flood maps have been redrawn. FEMA declared large swaths of Florida newly at risk. And banks? Some are starting to deny 30-year mortgages in certain zip codes. Then there's the heat. Florida's summer temperatures are regularly hitting dangerous highs. In July 2024, Miami recorded 22 extreme heat days, more than triple the average from just a decade ago. Power grids strain, air conditioning bills explode, and the threat of wildfires in the dry season? Rising. The environmental reality is no longer just a prediction, it's a lived experience. Compare Florida in 1980 to Florida now, and the shift is staggering. Wetter floods, stronger storms, hotter days, salty water. It's paradise, but it's fragile, and some are choosing to get out while they still can. So if you move to Florida for safety and stability, you might be rethinking that decision. And speaking of stability, let's talk about jobs. The remote work boom made Florida look great, but reality didn't stick. Back in 2020, Florida was the promised land for remote workers. Silicon Valley tech bros, New York media creatives, and startup founders all relocated to escape high taxes and cold winters. For a while, it worked, but 4 years later, many of them are gone. Why? Because the promise of opportunity in Florida hasn't matched reality. For starters, Florida's economy is heavily reliant on tourism, retail, and construction, sectors that often offer low to mid wages and inconsistent hours. Meanwhile, industries like tech, biotech, and media haven't grown fast enough to provide alternatives. If you're a software engineer or a creative director, the job market in Florida just isn't that deep. And then there's inflation. Wages in Florida haven't kept pace with costs. Between 2020 and 2024, median household income in the state increased by just 6%, while housing and utility costs soared by more than 25%. Young professionals are noticing, and they're leaving. Brain drain is a growing concern. Universities in Florida are graduating top-tier talent, but many of those graduates are leaving for cities like Austin, Charlotte, or Denver.
Take Jordan, a UX designer who moved to Florida during the remote work boom. At first I loved it, he said, but once my company started pulling people back to HQ, I had to decide, stay in Florida without support or go where the jobs are. He chose to leave.
And as more companies roll back remote work policies, more young workers are making the same choice. Florida may have attracted a wave of digital nomads, but it didn't give them a reason to stay. And now, they're heading elsewhere. The grass isn't just greener, it's cheaper. When people leave Florida, where do they go? Turns out, there's a clear pattern. The top destinations for former Floridians are states like Texas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arizona. And while each state has its appeal, the driving factor behind most moves is surprisingly simple: affordability plus stability. Let's break it down. In 2024, the median home price in Charlotte, North Carolina was $368,000. In Tampa, $424,000. That $50,000 gap makes a difference, especially for first-time buyers and families trying to get ahead. Tennessee is another hotspot. No state income tax, just like Florida, but with far less risk from hurricanes and flooding. Cities like Chattanooga and Knoxville have seen steady inbound migration, especially among retirees and remote workers. Texas, of course, has been the poster child of domestic migration for years now. Austin, Dallas, and Houston all offer job opportunities in tech, energy, and logistics. Housing costs are rising, yes, but you get more space, better job access, and a stronger economy. Then there's Arizona. Phoenix has become a magnet for people fleeing both California and Florida. The climate is hot, yes, but it's dry. Fewer hurricanes, more predictable seasons, and lower insurance premiums. Meet the Harpers, a family of 5 that left Orlando in 2023 after struggling with rising rent and a constant fear of storms. They moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where they found a home for less than $350,000 and a school district they loved.
Everything just felt calmer, and we don't wake up checking the hurricane tracker anymore.
More and more Americans are making the same kind of move. They're not just looking for a change of scenery, they're looking for security, financial, physical, emotional, and they're realizing that for all its sunshine, Florida isn't offering that anymore. But what happens to Florida after they leave? That's where things get even more complicated. So, what happens when paradise empties out? If thousands of residents are leaving Florida, there's a natural follow-up question. What happens to the state they leave behind? We're already starting to see the early signs, and they're not good. Vacancy rates are ticking up, especially in mid-range rental properties. In cities like Jacksonville and Fort Lauderdale, landlords are offering steep move-in discounts just to fill units that would have been gone in days during the pandemic. Tourism, Florida's economic backbone, is also beginning to feel the tremors. Hotel bookings in off-seasons are down. International travel hasn't returned to pre-2020 levels. And local tourist businesses are reporting tighter margins than ever. Labor shortages are hitting small businesses hard. With families leaving and fewer young workers moving in, restaurants, stores, and service companies are scrambling to hire, often offering higher wages just to stay open. But that creates a ripple effect. Higher wages mean higher prices for goods and services. So even those who stay in Florida are paying more to keep things running. Then there's real estate. Florida may be teetering on the edge of a housing bubble. Home prices remain high, but buyer demand is cooling. Interest rates have made it harder to buy, and many out-of-state investors are pulling out. In some markets, price drops are starting to appear, subtle, but steady. If this continues, we could see a serious correction. In short, Florida isn't crashing, but it is wobbling. And if the state doesn't course correct, that wobble could turn into a fall. But is there still time to fix it? Let's look at what Florida is trying to do to win people back. Florida still has time, but can it fix the cracks before it's too late? Despite the exodus, despite the rising water, and despite the political firestorms, Florida isn't down for the count. Not yet. The state government is making moves. In 2024, Florida passed an emergency insurance reform package aimed at stabilizing the property market. It includes expanded access to state-backed citizens insurance and tax breaks for hurricane-proofing homes. In Miami, a $3 billion infrastructure overhaul is underway, raising roads, rebuilding drainage systems, and redesigning waterfront zones. It's an ambitious bet on the city's future. There's also a push for green development. In Tampa, developers are now required to include flood mitigation plans in every major project. In Jacksonville, grants are available for upgrading HVAC systems to handle extreme heat. And politically, there are signs of recalibration. After multiple legal battles and PR blowback, state leaders have toned down some of the more controversial proposals. While the cultural divide remains, some counties are starting to focus more on unity and livability than headlines. Still, the road back is long and not guaranteed. The real question is, can Florida reinvent itself without losing what made it special in the first place? That's what's at stake. And it brings us to the most important part. Florida's story isn't just about beaches, politics, or property taxes. It's about a state and a country at a crossroads. Because the issues facing Florida aren't unique. Climate instability, housing bubbles, political polarization, infrastructure strain. These are national problems. What's happening in Miami today could be happening in Houston, Phoenix, or Charleston tomorrow. Florida isn't just a sunny escape anymore. It's a stress test for the future of American living. So if you're considering a move to Florida, or if you're thinking about leaving, ask yourself, is this the life you want 5 years from now? And if you're watching from another state, Florida might be showing you where you're headed next. Because paradise, it comes at a cost. What do you think? Are you in Florida, leaving, or thinking about making the move? Drop a comment below. We want to hear your story. And if this video gave you something to think about, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone planning their next big move. This isn't just about Florida, it's about all of us.